If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and let us know what city you're watching from. Let's continue. The rain was coming down hard over New York City in the early hours of that June morning, hammering against the windows of Mount Sinai Hospital as if it wanted to force its way in. Ryan Taylor opened his eyes slowly, feeling a strange weight in his head, as if someone had filled his skull with rocks. The white light of the room was too blinding, and it took him a few seconds to figure out where he was. The smell of antiseptic, the constant beeping of some machine next to the bed, the cream-colored walls. A hospital. He was in a hospital. He tried to move his right hand and felt a sharp pain shoot up his entire arm. His head throbbed with a dull, deep ache that seemed to come from inside his bones. Gradually, fragments of memory began to surface like shards of broken glass. The rain, the headlights, the sound of twisting metal, someone's scream, and then nothing. An accident. It had been an accident. Ryan closed his eyes again, trying to piece together that night. He had left the Hamptons late, after a meeting that ran much longer than expected. He was tired but anxious to get home. Beatrice had a recital at school on Friday, and he had promised he wouldn't miss it for the world. The girl had been rehearsing for weeks, and every night before bed she would sing the song for him, always asking if it sounded pretty, if he thought she would remember the lyrics. Ryan would smile and say she would be the star of the show, and Beatrice would smile back that wide grin that lit up her whole face, and ask her dad to promise he'd be there. "I promise, sweetie. Daddy will be in the front row," he always said. But now, lying in that hospital bed, his head bandaged and his body aching, Ryan didn't know if he could keep that promise. He didn't even know what day it was. He had lost all sense of time, of space, of everything. He only knew that he was in pain. A lot of pain. The room door opened softly, and a nurse entered with silent steps. She smiled when she saw Ryan was awake, but there was concern in her brown eyes. "Mr. Taylor, it's good to see you awake. How are you feeling?" Ryan tried to speak, but his voice came out hoarse, almost inaudible. With difficulty, he whispered that he was in pain. A lot of pain. The nurse checked the machines, jotted something on a clipboard, and explained in a calm, professional voice that he had undergone a delicate surgery on his skull. The accident had been serious. Very serious. A truck had swerved into his lane on the Long Island Expressway during the storm, and the collision was unavoidable. Ryan was lucky to be alive, but the head trauma required immediate intervention. The doctors had managed to stabilize him, but now he needed absolute rest. No stress, no exertion, no strong emotions. His brain needed time to recover. "How long was I out?" he managed to ask. 3 days, Mr. Taylor. 3 days since the surgery." Ryan closed his eyes again. 3 days. It felt like an eternity. He tried to remember more details of the accident, but everything was hazy, confusing. He vaguely remembered coming back from a meeting in the Hamptons. He remembered the torrential rain and then just a void. "My daughter," he murmured. "Beatrice, where's my daughter?" The nurse adjusted his IV and replied gently that the girl was fine, at home, being cared for by the nanny. She couldn't visit him yet because she was too young and the hospital had restrictions, but as soon as he was moved to a regular room, Beatrice could see him. His wife Melissa was on her way. She had gone home the night before to rest, but would be back soon. Ryan nodded slightly, each movement of his head bringing a new wave of pain. He closed his eyes and let himself be carried away by the darkness again, but this time it wasn't the sleep of unconsciousness. It was a stupor induced by medication, a strange state where he was half awake, half lost in fragmented thoughts. When he woke up again, it was late at night. The room was shrouded in dimness, with only the soft light of a lamp illuminating the space. And there, sitting in a chair by the window, was Melissa. She was staring at her phone screen with absolute attention, her fingers swiping quickly across the screen. Ryan tried to call her name, but his voice wouldn't come out. He just watched his wife, noticing details that in his fragile state seemed amplified. The way she furrowed her brow while reading something, The subtle smile that appeared on her lips for a brief moment, the way she typed something, deleted it, typed again as if carefully choosing her words. "Melissa," he finally managed to say, his voice weak. She looked up from her phone, startled, and quickly put the device in her purse. She stood up and approached the bed, but there was something mechanical in her movements, as if she were following a protocol. She asked how he was, if the pain had subsided, if he needed anything. The questions were correct, appropriate, but something was missing. Warmth was missing. Genuine concern was missing. "I'm better," Ryan lied. "And B, how is she?" Melissa sighed, running a hand through her impeccably styled blonde hair. "She's fine, Ryan. Sarah is taking good care of her. You know how Sarah is. She practically lives at our house anyway. The girl barely even noticed you were gone." There was something in the way Melissa said that, a hint of poorly disguised resentment that made Ryan frown. But before he could process that feeling, the headache returned with full force and he groaned softly. Melissa immediately called the nurse, and soon Ryan was receiving more medication. In a few minutes, he sank back into that peculiar state of semi-consciousness where the world around him became distant and hazy. The following days were a succession of tests, doctor's visits, medication adjustments, and fragmented conversations. The neurologist in charge of his case, Dr. Henry Porter, a man in his 50s with graying hair and square-rimmed glasses, patiently explained that Ryan had been very lucky. The surgery was a success, but the recovery process would be long. He would need at least 6 months of rest, constant monitoring, and a lot of care. Any new trauma or stress could cause serious complications. The brain, Dr. Porter explained, as if talking to a child, is a delicate organ. It needs time and tranquility to heal. Ryan listened attentively, but part of his mind was elsewhere. He was thinking about Beatrice, his 7-year-old daughter, with her curly brown hair and bright green eyes, so much like her biological mother that it sometimes hurt to look at her. Emily, his first wife, had left the family 3 years ago, claiming she could no longer handle the pressure of being a mother and a wife. Ryan still remembered that morning as if it were yesterday. He came home from a business trip and found a note on the kitchen table. Just a note. 4 handwritten lines saying she had to leave, that she couldn't live that life anymore, that he would take better care of the girl than she ever could. And that was it. No detailed explanation, no face-to-face goodbye, no chance to talk or try to work things out. Emily simply packed her bags and left, leaving behind a 4-year-old girl who cried for weeks asking when Mommy was coming back. Beatrice would spend her days sitting by the window, waiting. She refused to sleep unless someone checked to see if her mother wasn't coming back. Sometimes she would wake up in the middle of the night screaming, saying she had heard her mother's voice. Ryan didn't know what to do. He was devastated himself, but tried to keep it together for his daughter. He took Beatrice to a child psychologist who explained that the child was going through a grieving process and would need a lot of time, patience, and love to recover. It was during that time that Sarah became more than just a nanny. She had been with the family since Beatrice turned 2, initially hired to help Emily with the child's daily care. Sarah came from the Bronx and worked to support her mother, Mrs. Miller, who had serious health problems. The job at the tailor's house was a blessing for her, not just because of the fair salary Ryan paid, but because he also treated her with respect and consideration, something rare in the domestic work industry. When Emily left, Sarah proved to be a fundamental pillar. She not only cared for Beatrice with dedication and affection, but also helped Ryan reorganize the entire household routine. She started arriving earlier and leaving later. She prepared Beatrice's favorite meals, helped the girl with school activities, and stayed with her during her nightly episodes. Sarah had infinite patience. When Beatrice woke up crying, it was Sarah who ran to the room, turned on the soft lamp, sat on the bed and held the girl's hand until she fell back asleep. When Beatrice refused to eat, it was Sarah who invented games and stories to make mealtimes more fun. When Beatrice had nightmares about her mother, it was Sarah who hugged her and whispered that everything was okay, that she was safe, that many people loved her. Gradually, Beatrice began to bond with Sarah in a way that went beyond the relationship between a nanny and a child. Sarah became the maternal figure the girl so desperately needed. And Ryan, watching all of this, felt a deep gratitude for this woman who, without being asked, had chosen to stay and help rebuild the pieces of his family. Ryan met Melissa a year after the separation at a corporate gala overlooking Central Park. She was a PR executive for a cosmetics company, always impeccably dressed, and had that confident air of someone who could navigate any social setting. She was beautiful, with blonde hair that fell in perfect waves, blue eyes and a smile that commanded attention. She approached him that night, struck up a conversation about business and the real estate sector, which was Ryan's field, and within minutes they were talking like old friends. The relationship moved fast, perhaps too fast. Melissa was the complete opposite of Emily. Where Emily was introverted and a homebody, Melissa was extroverted and loved social events. Where Emily preferred staying home to watch movies, Melissa wanted to dine at the city's best restaurants. Ryan let himself get swept up in that vibrant energy by this woman who seemed to breathe new life into his routine. And when Melissa met Beatrice, everything seemed to fall perfectly into place. She was kind to the girl, bought her gifts, praised the drawings Beatrice made, and said all the right things. In less than 6 months they were married. The ceremony was small, just close family, and a few friends. Beatrice was the flower girl, wearing a pink dress that Melissa had personally chosen. The girl was radiant that day, and Ryan genuinely believed he was giving his daughter the complete family she deserved. But in recent months, Ryan had started to notice changes. Small things that meant nothing on their own but formed a troubling pattern when put together. Melissa was always busy, always had urgent commitments, meetings that ran late into the night, last-minute business trips. She spent more time out of the house than in it, and when she was home she seemed impatient, irritated by small things. A toy left in the living room, the volume of the TV, the sound of Beatrice running through the hallways. Beatrice, who had initially tried to get close to her stepmother with all the affection a 5-year-old could muster, had gradually withdrawn. Ryan noticed how his daughter would fall silent when Melissa entered the room, how her eyes would search for Sarah whenever her stepmother said something harsh, how she preferred to have breakfast in the kitchen with Sarah rather than in the dining room with Melissa. There was one day, about 2 months before, the accident when Ryan came home early and found Beatrice crying, hidden in her bedroom closet. When he asked what had happened, the girl hesitated, wiped her tears with the back of her hand, and said it was nothing. But Ryan insisted, sat on the floor next to her and waited. And finally Beatrice confessed in a trembling voice that Melissa had yelled at her because she had spilled juice on the outfit she was going to wear out. Melissa said Beatrice was clumsy, that she couldn't do anything right, that she was too much trouble. And when Beatrice started to cry, Melissa just left the room and slammed the door. Ryan felt anger rise in his chest. He talked to Melissa that same night, told her she couldn't treat Beatrice that way, that the girl was just a child. Melissa apologized, said she was stressed with work, that she didn't mean to be harsh, that she would do better. And for a few weeks she really was more careful. But soon she reverted to her old behavior, perhaps even worse. And Ryan, caught up in his own professional commitments, didn't realize in time how much the situation was deteriorating. Sarah noticed. Sarah always noticed everything. She saw how Beatrice flinched when Melissa was around, saw how the girl started having nightmares again, saw how Beatrice stopped calling Melissa by the affectionate nickname she had created in the first few months, and went back to just calling her Melissa with distance. But Sarah said nothing. It wasn't her place to question the family dynamics. She was just the nanny, the employee. So she did what she always did. She took care of Beatrice with all her dedication, offered the comfort the girl needed, and silently carried the weight of seeing a child she loved suffering without being able to do anything. Sarah, the nanny who wasn't just a nanny, the 28-year-old woman with her expressive brown eyes and shy smile, who knew Beatrice better than anyone, who knew exactly how to comb the girl's rebellious curls, which story she liked to hear before bed, what her favorite snack was. Sarah, who worked from 7 in the morning to 7 at night, and sometimes stayed later when Ryan had to travel. Sarah, who supported her sick mother with the salary she earned. Ryan had never thought much about Sarah as a person beyond her role in the house. But now, lying in that hospital bed, he found himself wondering if he really knew the people who were part of his life. On the 5th day after the surgery, Dr. Porter gave Ryan the news he had been waiting for. He could be discharged, as long as he strictly followed all medical instructions and had someone with him full-time for the first few weeks. A private nurse would be hired to monitor his vital signs, administer medication, and ensure he didn't exert himself. Ryan would need to use a wheelchair for at least 2 weeks, and then he could start walking short distances, always with supervision. Melissa organized everything efficiently. She hired a nurse named Brenda, a woman in her 60s with decades of experience in home care. She arranged for one of the downstairs rooms in their Upper East Side mansion to be adapted, so Ryan wouldn't have to climb stairs. She bought all the necessary medications and made a detailed list of the schedule for each one. On the morning of his discharge, Ryan was placed in a wheelchair and taken to the hospital exit. The private ambulance was already waiting. Melissa walked ahead, organizing the final details, talking on the phone to someone about who knows what. Ryan watched everything from that peculiar state of being heavily medicated. Things seemed to happen in slow motion, and at the same time, he felt like he had no control over anything. The ride home was silent. Ryan looked out the ambulance window, watching the city go by. New York was gray that morning, the sky overcast. The streets were congested, as always. Life went on as usual out there, indifferent to the fact that his life had changed. When the ambulance finally stopped in front of the mansion's gate, Ryan felt a tightness in his chest. It was his home, but at that moment, it felt strange, distant. The gate opened, and the ambulance drove up to the main entrance, and it was there, at the front door, that Ryan saw her. Sarah was standing on the threshold with Beatrice by her side. The girl was holding the nanny's hand tightly, her eyes wide and bright with unshed tears. As soon as she saw her father being taken out of the ambulance in the wheelchair, Beatrice let go of Sarah's hand and ran towards him, but was stopped by Melissa, who grabbed her by the arm. "Beatrice, be careful. Your father is very fragile. You can't jump on him like that." The girl stopped immediately, frightened, and went back to Sarah, who wrapped her in a protective hug. Ryan saw it all, saw the fear in his daughter's eyes, saw the way Melissa had held her with more force than necessary, saw how Sarah instinctively shielded the child, and he felt something twist inside him. Daddy's okay," he said in a weak voice. "Come here, sweetie. Come see Daddy." Beatrice looked at Melissa for permission, and when her stepmother nodded with an impatient gesture, the girl approached slowly, carefully, as if dealing with something very fragile. She knelt beside the wheelchair and held her father's hand with both of her small ones. "Daddy, I was so scared. I thought you weren't coming back." Ryan felt tears burn his eyes. "I'll always come back for you, Bea. Always." Over his daughter's head he looked at Sarah. She was a few steps behind, her hands clasped, her face marked by worry and relief. Her eyes met his for a brief moment, and Ryan saw a depth of feeling there that he had never noticed before. Sarah quickly looked away. The paramedics transferred Ryan to a hospital bed that had been set up in the adapted downstairs room. The space had everything he needed: a bed, an armchair, a table with water and medication, a television, and a window overlooking the garden. Melissa had chosen thick curtains to block out excessive light, and the room was dim, even though it was noon. Brenda, the nurse, took control. She checked his vitals, wrote everything in a notebook, explained the medication routine, and made it clear that he needed absolute rest. No long visits, no tiring conversations. Ryan was to sleep as much as possible, eat light meals, and let his body recover. Melissa oversaw everything, but checked her phone every few minutes. When Brenda finished, Melissa announced she had to leave to handle urgent matters at work. She kissed Ryan's forehead quickly, without affection, and left with hurried steps. Sarah, who had been standing at the door with Beatrice, approached timidly. "Mr. Taylor, if you need anything, just call. I'll be here all day. And Bea wants to stay close to you too." Brenda looked at the girl and then at Ryan. "Half an hour a day, Max. The child can keep him company, but without making noise or tiring the patient." Beatrice nodded solemnly, as if she had been given the most important mission of her life. Sarah smiled at the girl with a tenderness Ryan had seen 1,000 times, but which now touched him in a different way. The first few days at home were a haze of medication, sleep, and pain. Ryan spent most of his time half awake, half asleep. The medication was strong, combining potent painkillers with sedatives to ensure rest. Dr. Porter had been clear about the importance of rest. You need to rest. Let your body do its work. In that peculiar state, Ryan perceived the world around him in fragments. He heard voices, footsteps, doors, but everything seemed distant. The voices sounded muffled, the movements in slow motion. He had the strange sensation of floating. He could hear conversations, understand the words, but he couldn't respond. Brenda explained to Melissa and Sarah that this was normal. It was the effect of the medication, especially in the first few days. His body was adjusting to the drugs, while recovering from the trauma. Over time, as the dosage was adjusted, Ryan would become more alert, more present. But for now, he needed that state of deep rest. Melissa would show up occasionally, but her visits were brief and always rushed. She would enter the room, check if he was breathing normally, exchange a few mechanical words with Brenda about the medication and schedules, glance quickly at her husband as if looking at a broken piece of furniture that needed fixing, and then leave. Always with that poorly disguised expression of impatience, always with her phone in hand, constantly, vibrating with messages and calls, always with that posture of someone who had much more important places to be. Ryan, even in his hazy state, noticed the lack of warmth in her touch when she adjusted his blanket. He noticed the hurry in her steps when she left the room. He noticed the relief in her voice when Brenda said he was stable and didn't need extra care. It was as if Melissa were there playing a role, acting the part of the concerned wife, but without actually feeling any concern. Sarah, on the other hand, was always nearby. Ryan could hear her talking softly with Brenda about the medication, about meal times, about small details of daily care. There was something genuine in that concern, something that contrasted completely with Melissa's coldness. Sarah would ask if the room temperature was okay, if the lighting wasn't too bright, if the pillow was comfortable. Small details, but they revealed true attentiveness. Ryan also heard Sarah humming softly while folding clothes in the next room. She always hummed when she worked, usually old songs she said her mother used to sing when she was a child. They were gentle, comforting, melodies that somehow soothed Ryan's throbbing headache. He heard the soft sound of her footsteps in the hallway, always careful not to make noise. He heard her patient voice talking to Beatrice, explaining why her father needed quiet, why they couldn't make much noise, but at the same time reassuring the girl that he would be better soon. Beatrice came to visit him every day, usually in the late afternoon after school. The routine was always the same. Sarah would bring the girl, who would take off her shoes at the door to avoid making noise with her little steps. Beatrice would approach the bed slowly, as if approaching something very fragile and precious. She would sit in the armchair next to the bed, pull her legs up, hug her knees, and start talking about her day. She talked about science class, where they were studying the water cycle, about her English teacher who had praised the essay she wrote about her family, about recess, where she and her best friend Jessica invented a new game, about art class, where they made collages with old magazines. She spoke softly, obeying Brenda's strict instructions, but her eyes sparkled as she told her stories. It was as if she believed that by telling him about the world outside, she could bring a little life into that silent, dim room. And whenever she finished her stories for the day, Beatrice would look at her father's face and whisper the same thing, like a sacred ritual she repeated every afternoon. "Daddy, when you get better, we're going to get ice cream at the mall, right? You promised before the accident. You said you'd take me to the mall to get 2 ice creams, 1 chocolate and 1 strawberry. Do you remember, Daddy?" And Ryan, even without being able to fully open his eyes, even trapped in that state of semi-consciousness, always tried to answer. His voice came out weak, slurred, almost inaudible, but he would say it. "Yes, we will, sweetie. Daddy promises. 2 ice creams, chocolate and strawberry." And Sarah, who always accompanied Beatrice on these visits, would stand by the armchair, attentive, watching the girl's every move with that protective gaze of someone guarding something precious. her hands always ready to intervene if Beatrice made any sudden movement that could hurt her father. But Beatrice never did. The girl had understood, with that peculiar wisdom of children, that her father was fragile, that he needed care, gentleness. So she was gentle. She didn't jump. She didn't shout. She didn't make sudden movements. She just sat there, told her stories in a low voice, and looked at her father with those green eyes full of a mixture of love and fear. When the visit time was up, strictly timed by Brenda, who allowed no more than half an hour a day, Beatrice would get up slowly from the armchair. She would approach the bed carefully as if approaching something sacred. She would lean down and kiss her father's face, always careful not to touch his bandaged head, always as gentle as a butterfly. "I love you, Daddy," she would whisper. "Get well soon." And then she would leave the room, hand in hand with Sarah, looking back one last time before closing the door carefully. And Ryan would lie there alone in the silence of the room, with a heavy heart and eyes burning with tears he couldn't shed. Because even in his fragile state, even confined to that bed, even wrapped in that medicinal haze, he could feel. He felt his daughter's love. He felt Sarah's dedication, and he felt painfully Melissa's absence. It was on the third day at home that something changed. It was late afternoon. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky orange and pink, but Ryan's room was shrouded in dimness because of the thick curtains blocking the light. He was lying in bed, in one of those states of semi-consciousness induced by the strong medication he had taken about an hour ago. His eyes were closed, his breathing was slow and regular, and to any outside observer he appeared to be deeply asleep, completely unaware of the world around him. But his mind was awake. It was floating in that strange space between sleep and wakefulness, where he could hear everything around him with surprising clarity, could process conversations and sounds, but couldn't move or open his eyes. It was like being trapped inside his own body, conscious but immobile, present but absent. It was in this state that he heard the bedroom door open softly, the sound of the doorknob turning, the slight creak of the hinges, the almost imperceptible whisper of the door sliding over the carpet. Light footsteps approached the bed. They weren't the firm professional steps of Brenda, who had the characteristic gait of someone who had spent decades working in hospitals. They weren't the hurried, impatient steps of Melissa, always with that sound of high heels echoing through the house's hallways. These were different steps, hesitant, soft, like someone who didn't want to be noticed, like someone trying not to make a sound. Ryan smelled the faint scent of a discreet floral perfume. It wasn't the expensive, intense perfume Melissa wore, that French perfume with a complicated name she bought on Madison Avenue. This was something simpler, more natural, more genuine. And he recognized it immediately. Sarah. She came closer to the bed and stood there for a few seconds in absolute silence. Ryan could feel her looking at him. He could imagine the expression on her face, that look of genuine concern she always had when she was taking care of someone. After a few moments that seemed to stretch into an eternity, he heard the sound of drawers being opened and closed with extreme care. Every movement was calculated, silent, respectful. Sarah was putting away clothes. Probably Beatrice's clothes that needed to be kept in that room temporarily. While the girls' upstairs bedroom was being painted and reorganized, Ryan remained motionless, his breathing slow and deep, maintaining the appearance of deep sleep. And it was as Sarah was finishing organizing the last pieces of clothing that Brenda entered the room. Ryan heard the nurse's firm steps, heard the sound of the clipboard she always carried tapping lightly against her leg as she walked. "Sarah." Brenda's voice was low but clear, carrying that maternal kindness that was characteristic of her. "You look tired, honey. You have dark circles under your eyes. You're not sleeping well, are you?" There was a silence. A heavy, charged silence that stretched for seconds that felt like minutes. And then, to Ryan's absolute surprise, he heard Sarah start to cry. It wasn't a loud or dramatic cry. It was a restrained, choked sob, like someone who has been holding something in for too long and finally breaks. It was the cry of someone carrying a huge weight alone and can't take it anymore. "Brenda." Sarah's voice came out trembling, broken, filled with a pain Ryan had never heard in her before. Brenda, I can't do this anymore. I can't keep this to myself. I can't pretend I don't see, pretend I don't know. Pretend everything is okay when it's not. And it was at that moment, that exact moment, that Ryan's life changed forever. Because what came next, what Sarah confessed believing he was deeply sedated and completely unable to hear, would reveal truths that were hidden in the shadows of his own home. Truths about betrayals, about secrets, about hidden feelings. Truths that, once known, could no longer be ignored. Truths that would change everything. Brenda approached Sarah and placed a hand on the young woman's shoulder with the gentleness of someone who has seen a lot of pain in her life and has learned to comfort without judgment. It's okay, honey. You don't have to keep it all to yourself. You can talk. Mr. Taylor is in a deep sleep from the medication. He won't hear a thing. And I know how to keep a secret. I've learned that in 40 years in this profession. Sarah wiped her tears with the back of her hand, taking a deep breath to control herself. But the sobs kept escaping. She looked at Ryan in the bed, saw his chest rising and falling in a slow, regular rhythm, saw his closed eyes, the peaceful expression of someone completely unconscious. And she believed he really couldn't hear her. She believed she could finally unburden herself of the weight she had been carrying for so long, that was crushing her chest, stealing her sleep, consuming her peace. And Ryan, motionless in that bed, trapped in that strange state between consciousness and unconsciousness, prepared himself to listen. His heart started beating faster, but he kept his breathing controlled, deep, regular. He couldn't reveal that he was awake. He couldn't miss this chance to find out what Sarah was hiding. Brenda, Sarah began in a trembling voice, I've worked in this house for 5 years. 5 years taking care of Beatrice, watching that little girl grow up, turning my life upside down in the most beautiful way possible. When her mother left, I saw that child fall apart. I saw in her eyes the pain of being abandoned by her own mother. I saw her ask every day for months if her mommy was coming back. And every time I said I didn't know, I saw a little piece of her die inside. Sarah paused, her crying growing more intense. I picked up her pieces, Brenda. I was the one who woke up in the middle of the night when she screamed from nightmares, dreaming she was alone in a dark place. I was the one who taught her how to write her name, tie her shoes, comb her curly hair that got so tangled. I was the one who was there when she cried for her mother, when she asked why she wasn't good enough for her mother to have stayed. And every time she asked that question, my heart broke a little more. Sarah's voice was completely choked with emotion now. And slowly, without realizing it, that little girl became a part of me. She became my daughter in my heart, you know? Not on paper, not officially, but in here. Sarah tapped her chest hard, as if trying to rip out the pain trapped there. I wake up in the morning thinking about her. I go to sleep wondering if she's okay, if she had nightmares, if she's happy. When she gets sick, I worry more than if it were me. When she's sad, I feel her sadness as if it were my own. She's my girl, even if the whole world says she isn't. Brenda just listened, nodding with understanding without interrupting. And Mr. Taylor, Sarah continued, her voice getting even lower, he's always been a good man, generous, fair. He paid my salary on time, treated me with respect, asked about my mother, gave me time off when I needed to take her to the doctor. He never made me feel less important just because I was the nanny. And when Mrs. Emily left, he was lost. I saw his pain. I saw how he tried to be strong for Beatrice, but how he was falling apart inside too. And I wanted to help. I wanted to do anything to ease that suffering. The silence hung heavy in the room for a few seconds. Sarah took a deep breath, the tears still streaming down her face, but she no longer tried to hide them. That's when he met Melissa, Sarah said, and her voice changed completely. It became hard, filled with something Ryan had never heard there before. Bitterness, contained anger, deep hurt. And everything changed. Brenda frowned. His current wife? Sarah nodded. She showed up all beautiful, all charming, saying all the right things. And Mr. Taylor was so lonely, so in need of someone, that he didn't see what I saw. He didn't realize she didn't look at Beatrice with love. He didn't notice how she faked interest in the girl only when he was around, how she changed completely when she was alone with us. Ryan felt a knot in his stomach. Every word from Sarah was like a punch to the gut. He forced himself to keep his breathing regular, not to move, not to react. He needed to hear. He needed to know. At first, Sarah continued, I thought maybe it was all in my head, that I was being unfair to her. After all, it's not easy to come into a family with a child that isn't yours, with a nanny who's been there for years. I tried to give her a chance. I tried to be polite, to be helpful. I offered to help with everything, from organizing the house to giving opinions on decor, on Beatrice's routine. But she always treated me with that coldness disguised as politeness. You know when someone says thank you, but you feel like they mean, get out of my face? It was like that. And then strange things started happening, small things that meant nothing on their own, but together they formed a pattern I couldn't ignore. Melissa started going out a lot, always with excuses about work, meetings, corporate events, dinners with clients. Mr. Taylor traveled a lot for business. Sometimes he'd be gone for 3-4 days, and on those days she would practically disappear. She'd leave early in the morning, come back in the middle of the night. Sometimes she wouldn't come back at all. She'd call saying the event ran too late, that she'd had a drink and preferred to sleep at a friend's house, that she didn't want to risk driving. And I thought it was strange, but it wasn't my business, right? I was just the nanny. What kind of things? Brenda asked softly. Sarah wiped her face again, and her voice grew even more tense. Melissa started going out a lot, always with excuses about work, meetings, events. Mr. Taylor traveled a lot for business, and on those days she would stay out late. She'd come back in the middle of the night, sometimes not at all, saying she'd slept at a friend's house. And I thought it was strange, but it wasn't my business, right? I was just the nanny. But then one day, Sarah paused, her voice trembling even more. One day I forgot my wallet here and came back at night to get it. I have a key to the house because sometimes I need to get here before everyone to take care of Bea when she has an early appointment, or because Mr. Taylor needs to leave very early. It was almost 10 at night. I knew Mr. Taylor was traveling to Chicago for an important meeting with investors because he had told me I'd need to stay later the next day because Melissa had an event. Sarah took a deep breath, as if needing courage to continue. When I came in through the back door, which leads to the kitchen, I heard voices in the living room. Laughter, soft music playing, those romantic songs Melissa likes. My first thought was that she was watching something on TV, maybe a movie. But then I heard her laugh. That laugh I've never heard her give Mr. Taylor, you know. A light, happy, seductive laugh. Sarah's hands were shaking as she spoke. I went to the kitchen slowly, careful not to make any noise. I'm not sure why. Maybe my gut was telling me something was wrong. And that's when I saw the sink. There were 2 wine glasses there, still with traces of red wine. 2 glasses. And they weren't just any glasses. They were those special crystal glasses Mr. Taylor got as a wedding gift from his first wife. The glasses he kept in the high cabinet and only used on very special occasions. Sarah paused, her crying growing more intense. And when I passed by the door, from the kitchen to the living room, I saw it. I saw her with a man I had never seen before. He was tall, dark-haired, well-dressed, and they were on the sofa, that leather sofa in front of the fireplace. They were very close, and she had her head on his shoulder, and he had his arm around her, and there were candles lit around the room. Candles. Like it was a romantic date. Sarah's voice broke completely. And when she realized I was there, when she turned her head and saw me standing in the doorway, she jumped away from him. It was so fast his wine glass almost fell. And you know what was worse? It was seeing her face change. One second she was relaxed, happy, and the next second she had that mask of coldness, that calculating look. There was no shame there, no guilt, just anger at being caught. Ryan's heart was racing now. He felt the blood pounding in his temples, the headache returning with full force, but he couldn't move. He couldn't react. He couldn't reveal that he was hearing every word, every devastating detail of that confession. Brenda let out, A low gasp of astonishment. And what did she say? She made up a story, Sarah replied bitterly. Said he was a co-worker, that they were reviewing some documents, that it had been so tiring she offered him a glass of wine. She said all that looking me straight in the eye without blinking, as if I were stupid, as if I hadn't seen the way they were sitting, how close they were. But what was I going to do? I had no proof of anything. I grabbed my wallet and left. But it wasn't just that one time, was it? Brenda said, more a statement than a question. Sarah shook her head. No. After that night I started noticing things. Men's clothes left in the pool house bathroom when Mr. Taylor was traveling. The smell of a man's cologne in the living room, a cologne that wasn't his. Wet towels that didn't belong to anyone in the house. And I kept it all to myself, made mental notes, but I didn't know what to do with it. Why didn't you tell Mr. Taylor? Brenda asked gently. Sarah let out a bitter laugh, devoid of humor, a laugh that sounded more like a disguised sob. I tried, Brenda, God knows I tried. 3 months ago, when he came back from a 2-week trip to the West Coast, I worked up the courage. I waited for him to arrive, waited for him to settle in, and then I asked to talk to him. I said I needed to talk about something very important, that it was about the family, about the house. He looked at me with that attention he always gave when someone needed to talk to him, that respectful way he has of listening, and said we could talk, as soon as he took a shower and had something to eat. Sarah wiped away more tears that insisted on falling. But Melissa heard. She always heard everything. She has this way of suddenly appearing, silently, as if she's always lurking, always watching. And that same night, as I was leaving, she called me into the kitchen, said she needed to talk to me. And I went, naively, thinking it was about something with Beatrice's routine, about the week's menu, I don't know. Sarah's voice dropped lower, filled with fear and hurt. She closed the kitchen door and then she changed completely. Her face became cold, hard, threatening. And she said in that calm, controlled voice that if I opened my mouth to Mr. Taylor about anything I thought I saw, she would destroy me. Those weren't her exact words, but that's what she meant. What did she say? Brenda asked, her voice now laced with indignation. Sarah took a deep breath, as if reliving that moment was physically painful. She said that if I told Mr. Taylor anything, she would accuse me of theft. She said she would make up that I had been taking money from her wallet for months, that she would say her jewelry had gone missing, that she would plant evidence in my locker, in my purse, wherever necessary. She said she would fire me for cause, with no references, and on top of that, she would make sure to tell all the wealthy families she knows that I was a thief, that she would destroy my reputation so thoroughly that no one would ever hire me again. Sarah's voice was completely choked now, and she knew exactly where to hit the hardest. She mentioned my mother. She said she knew my mother. Has diabetes, high blood pressure, heart problems. She said she knew her medications are expensive, that I need this job to pay our rent, to put food on the table, to keep my mother alive. And she looked me in the eye and asked if I really wanted to risk all that over a silly suspicion, an assumption I couldn't even prove. Sarah paused, sobbing. And I was scared, Brenda. I was so scared. Because I knew she was capable of doing exactly what she was threatening. I saw it in her eyes. I saw she wasn't bluffing. And I thought about my mother, thought about how she would be if I lost this job, thought about how I would pay for her medication, the rent, everything, and I kept quiet. I swallowed everything I had seen, and I kept quiet. Ryan felt anger rise like lava in his chest. The hands that had been relaxed by his sides were now clenched into fists, but he couldn't move. He couldn't reveal that he was hearing every word, every confession, every bitter truth being poured out in that room. But that's not all, is it? Brenda said softly. There's something else, eating you up inside. Sarah was silent for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was so low that Ryan had to make a mental effort to hear. I fell in love with him, Sarah confessed, and the words came out as if each one weighed a ton. I fell in love with Mr. Taylor, and I know it's wrong, I know I shouldn't, I know I'm just the nanny and he's my boss, that we live in completely different worlds. But I couldn't help it. I saw how he was with Beatrice, saw how good he was. How fair he was, how he always tried to do the right thing. I saw how he suffered, how he struggled to be both a father and a mother. And slowly, without realizing it, I fell in love. Brenda said nothing, just waited for Sarah to continue. "But I always knew this feeling had no place," Sarah said, her voice broken. "I always knew I had to keep it to myself, because it could never, ever be returned. Not because of a difference in money or social class, but because he never saw me that way. To him, I was, and always will be, just Sarah, his daughter's nanny. The person who takes care of Beatrice, and that's okay, I accepted that. I learned to live with it. I was content to be near him, to be part of Beatrice's life, to know that in some way I was helping that family." Sarah paused, wiping away the tears that wouldn't stop falling. "But then he married Melissa, and I watched that woman slowly destroy everything he had built. I saw her treat Beatrice with coldness, with impatience, sometimes even with cruelty when she thought no one was watching. I saw her cheat on him in his own home, bringing men here acting as if he were an idiot who would never find out. And I couldn't do anything. I couldn't tell him because she had threatened me. I couldn't act because I had no proof. I could only watch, silently, while this good man, this man I loved in silence, was betrayed and humiliated in his own home. The silence that followed was dense, heavy, suffocating. Ryan felt every muscle in his body tense, his jaw clenched, his breath wanting to quicken but forced to remain slow and controlled. The headache was unbearable now, but it was nothing compared to the pain in his chest, the feeling of being betrayed, used, deceived. "And now, with his accident," Sarah continued in a choked voice, "I look at him in this bed, so fragile, so hurt, and I think that he could have been gone. I think that I could have lost him without ever telling the truth. And Melissa, she barely shows up here. She's on her phone all the time, rushing off to deal with who knows what, coming back late at night, and I know she's with another man. I saw the messages on her phone when she left it in the kitchen. I saw the compromising conversations. I saw the pictures, and I can't take it anymore, Brenda. I can't pretend I don't see, that I don't know." Brenda hugged Sarah, letting the young woman cry on her shoulder. "You poor thing, you're carrying such a heavy burden all by yourself." "And Beatrice," Sarah sobbed. "Bea suffers so much. Melissa is so harsh with her. She yells at her for anything, never has any patience, never shows any affection. And Bea comes to me crying, saying she misses her dad, that she's afraid he won't get better, that she's afraid of being left alone with Melissa. And I hug that little girl and promise her everything will be okay, but I don't know if it will. I don't know what will happen when Mr. Taylor gets better. I don't know if he'll believe me if I tell him the truth. I don't know if Melissa will follow through on her threats and I'll lose my job. And worst of all, the very worst, is that I'll have to keep seeing him with her, knowing everything, knowing she doesn't deserve him, knowing she's destroying him and Beatrice." Brenda gently pulled Sarah away and looked into her eyes. "Listen to me, honey. You can't go on like this. It's not fair to you. It's not fair to the child. And it's not fair to Mr. Taylor. He has a right to know the truth." "But how can I tell him?" Sarah said desperately. "How can I just go to him and say all this? What if he doesn't believe me? What if he thinks I'm making it up because I'm jealous of his wife?" Brenda held Sarah's hands firmly. "If he's the good man you say he is, he'll listen, and you need to get proof. Photos, messages, anything that proves what you're saying. Then he'll have no choice but to see the truth." Sarah nodded slowly, wiping her tears. "But first, he needs to get better. He needs to be well. The doctor said stress could harm his recovery. I can't go to him now and dump all this on him." "You're right," Brenda agreed. "We'll wait until he's stronger. But in the meantime, you keep an eye out. Write everything down. Save any proof you can. And when the time is right, you tell him everything." The two women stood in silence for a few more moments. Sarah took a deep breath, trying to compose herself, wiping the last traces of tears from her face. "Thank you for listening, Brenda. Thank you for not judging me." "I'm not here to judge anyone, honey. I'm here to take care of the patient and, if possible, help the people around him too. And you clearly need help." Sarah nodded, looked one more time at Ryan in the bed, sighed deeply and left the room in silence, closing the door carefully behind her. Brenda stayed for a few more minutes, checking Ryan's vitals, adjusting the blanket, checking the IV. Then she too left, leaving the room in silence, and Ryan finally allowed a single tear to escape from the corner of his closed eye, a single tear that ran down his temple and was lost in the pillow. His world had crumbled in a matter of minutes. The woman he trusted, the woman he had married believing he was rebuilding a family for Beatrice, was a lie, a complete fraud. And worse, she was bringing other men into his house, threatening Sarah to keep the secret, treating Beatrice with cruelty. And Sarah, the Sarah he had always seen only as the dedicated nanny, the efficient employee, was actually a woman who loved him in silence. A woman who had protected his daughter, who had carried heavy secrets alone, who had been threatened and intimidated, all to avoid harming the family she loved. Ryan lay there, motionless, processing everything he had heard. The anger, the pain, the sense of betrayal were almost physical, as if someone were squeezing his chest with their hands. But along with all that, there was also a strange clarity, a sudden understanding of many things he had ignored, had chosen not to see. Melissa's constant absences, the ever-ready excuses, the way she treated Beatrice when she thought no one was paying attention. The stark contrast between her coldness and Sarah's dedication. It had all been there, right in front of him the whole time, but he had refused to see it. And now he knew. He knew everything, and he had to decide what to do with that information. But first he needed to observe, he needed to see with his own eyes what Sarah had described. He needed to confirm it, even though deep down he already knew that every word Sarah had spoken was true. So he made a decision. He would continue to pretend he was deeply sedated. He would remain in that state of apparent semi-consciousness, but he would watch everything, every movement, every word, every action, and when he had enough proof, when he was absolutely certain, he would act. The following days were a silent torture for Ryan. He maintained the charade of deep sedation, opening his eyes only occasionally for brief moments, always appearing confused and disoriented, before quickly returning to that state of torpor. Brenda believed it was the effect of the medication. Melissa, on the rare occasions she appeared, didn't even notice. But Ryan was alert. He was listening, observing, mentally recording every detail. Melissa would come to his room once or twice a day, always in a hurry. She would enter, check if he was breathing, ask Brenda about his vitals, and then quickly invent an excuse to leave. Always with her phone in hand, always buzzing with messages. Ryan, in the brief moments he could crack his eyes open, saw the name. That appeared on the screen when she didn't lock it in time. Diego. Always Diego. Message after message from someone named Diego. One night, Melissa entered the room when she thought everyone was asleep. Ryan heard the door open slowly, her footsteps approaching. She stood by the bed for a few seconds, and then he heard her voice, low, cold, speaking on the phone. "No, honey, he's still practically unconscious. The doctor said it will be weeks before he's okay. We have time." Silence as she listened to the person on the other end. "I know it's risky, but he never suspects a thing. And even if he does, what's he going to do? He's stuck in this bed, dependent on everyone. And when he gets better, if he starts asking questions, I'll already have what I need." More silence. "Don't worry. I know what I'm doing. We just need to be patient. And that little nanny won't open her mouth. I've already made it very clear what happens if she says anything. She needs this job to support her sick mother. She won't risk it." Ryan felt the anger boil inside him. Every cell in his body wanted to jump out of that bed and confront Melissa right there. But he controlled himself. It wasn't time. He needed more. He needed concrete proof. Melissa left the room shortly after, and Ryan lay there, in the dark, seething with rage, but maintaining a forced calm. Meanwhile, Sarah continued her routine of caring for Beatrice, but now Ryan saw everything with new eyes. He saw the genuine love with which she treated the girl. He saw the infinite patience, the dedication, the affection. He also saw the contrast with Melissa. One afternoon, Beatrice entered the room for her daily visit, as, always accompanied by Sarah. The girl sat in the armchair and began to talk about her day at school. but she was visibly sad. "Daddy," she whispered, holding his hand, "I miss you so much. Melissa said I'm getting in the way of your recovery, that I make too much noise. She said it would be better if I stayed in my room and didn't come down so much, but I just want to be near you." Ryan, even with his eyes closed, felt his heart break, and he heard Sarah kneel beside the armchair and hug Beatrice. "Bea, sweetie," her voice was as soft as honey, "your daddy loves you very much, and as soon as he gets better, you two can be together as much as you want. For now, we need to let him rest, but that doesn't mean you're in the way. You're never in the way. You're the most special girl in the world." "What if he doesn't get better?" Beatrice asked in a small voice full of fear. "What if he stays like this forever?" "He will get better," Sarah said with conviction. "Your dad is strong, and he has you. He has very important reasons to get better. You're his most important reason." Beatrice hugged Sarah tightly. "Sarah, I wish you were my real mum, not Melissa. You." Ryan felt tears burn behind his closed eyelids, and he heard Sarah stifle a sob before replying. "I love you as if you were my own daughter, Bea. I'll always love you like that. I'll always take care of you, no matter what happens." It was in that moment that something inside Ryan broke for good. It wasn't just the anger of being betrayed. It wasn't just the pain of discovering Melissa was a fraud. It was the clear, crystal, undeniable revelation of who really mattered, of who was truly there for the family, for true love, without self-interest, without ulterior motives. And he knew in that instant exactly what he had to do. But it wasn't time yet. He needed proof. He needed to catch Melissa in the act. He needed something concrete to confront her and banish her from his life and Beatrice's life forever. In the following days, Ryan began to secretly regain more mobility. When he was alone in the room, he would move his fingers, his arms, and try to sit up in bed for brief moments. The headache was still constant, but it was diminishing. His body was responding, and soon, very soon, he would be able to act. It was on a Friday night that everything came to a head. Brenda had left early for an unavoidable family commitment. Melissa took advantage of the nurse's absence and dismissed Sarah as well, making up some excuse about needing privacy to care for her husband. Sarah hesitated, clearly suspicious, but she had no choice. She said goodbye to Beatrice, who was already asleep, and left with a heavy heart. Ryan heard Melissa lock the front door. He heard her go upstairs. He heard her in the room above his, probably getting ready. And then, about an hour later, he heard the doorbell ring. He heard Melissa hurry downstairs. He heard her open the door. He heard a deep male voice followed by laughter, and he knew the time had come. Ryan heard Melissa's footsteps approaching the front door. He heard the sound of the lock turning, the slight creak of the heavy wooden door. He heard her voice, soft and welcoming in a way she never used with him or Beatrice. "Diego, so good to see you. Come in, I've missed you." The male voice that replied was deep, confident. "Missed you too, baby. Where's your invalid husband?" Ryan's blood boiled in his veins hearing that. Invalid, as if he were a broken, disposable, insignificant object. But he remained calm. It wasn't time yet. He needed concrete proof. He needed to catch Melissa in an undeniable way. "He's in the downstairs room," Melissa replied with a laugh Ryan had never heard before, a light and carefree laugh. "Drugged up to his eyeballs on meds, doesn't even know what a day it is. The nurse left early and I sent the little Nanny home too. We have the whole house to ourselves." Ryan heard their footsteps moving towards the living room, heard the sound of music starting to play softly, heard more laughter. He waited a few minutes, gathering his strength. The headache was intense, but the anger was stronger. Slowly, very slowly, he opened his eyes completely for the first time in days. His vision was a bit blurry, but he could see. He moved his fingers, then his hands, then his arms. His body was weak, much weaker than he would have liked, but it was responding. With extreme care not to make a sound, Ryan sat up in bed. His head spun for a moment, and he had to grip the side of the bed to keep from falling. He took a deep breath, waited for the dizziness to pass. Then, slowly, he put his feet on the floor. The contact with the cold floor made him shiver, but it felt good. It was real. It was confirmation that he was awake, he was conscious, he was able to act. He stood up, leaning on the bed. His legs trembled, too weak after days of disuse, but they held his weight. He took a step, then another. He staggered a bit, but didn't fall. He looked around the room for his phone. It was on the nightstand, exactly where Brenda always left it after showing him messages from friends and business partners, wishing him a speedy recovery. Ryan picked up the phone with trembling hands. He unlocked the screen, opened the camera app, and switched it to video mode. He needed proof. He needed something Melissa couldn't deny, couldn't manipulate, couldn't turn into another one of her elaborate lies. He held the phone tightly and started walking towards the bedroom door. Every step was an effort. His body protested, his head throbbed, but he kept going. He opened the bedroom door with extreme care, making as little noise as possible. The hallway was empty. The music was coming from the living room, louder now, a slow, romantic song, the kind couples listen to when they want to create an intimate mood. Ryan walked down the hallway, leaning on the wall whenever he needed to. He passed the staircase leading to the second floor, where Beatrice was sleeping, peacefully unaware of anything. At least she was far from this. At least she wouldn't have to see this scene. When he got near the living room, Ryan stopped. He took a deep breath. He raised his phone and pressed the record button. The camera started capturing everything. And then he took a few more steps and looked through the doorway. What he saw confirmed everything Sarah had said, and worse. Melissa was on the sofa, in the arms of a man Ryan had never seen. They were very close, intimately close, and there was no doubt about the nature of that proximity. His hands were on her waist, her lips were on his neck, and both were completely oblivious to the fact that they were being watched and filmed. Ryan recorded for a few more seconds, capturing different angles, ensuring there would be no way to deny what was happening. And then, when he was sure he had enough proof, he stopped the recording, put the phone in his pajama pocket, and stepped into the living room. His voice came out hoarse, weak, but filled with a cold fury he had never felt before. "Melissa!" The effect was instantaneous. Melissa and the man sprang apart as if they'd been electrocuted. Her face turned pale, her eyes widened in panic. The man quickly got up from the sofa, adjusting his clothes, his expression shifting between surprise and fear. "Ryan," Melissa stammered, her voice high-pitched. You're awake. I thought... The doctors said you'd be sedated for longer." Ryan took a few more steps into the room, leaning on the doorframe to keep from falling. "I was awake, Melissa. Awake and aware. Hearing everything. Seeing everything. For days." The panic on her face intensified. "What do you mean, for days? You were unconscious. You were..." "I was faking," Ryan cut in, his voice growing stronger as the anger gave him energy. "Faking being sedated so I could watch. So I could find out the truth about who you really are." Melissa tried to recover, tried to put on that mask of the concerned wife she wore so well. "Ryan, you're confused. The accident affected your head. You don't know what you're saying. This is Diego. He's just a co-worker who came over to..." "Shut up," Ryan said with a force that surprised even himself. "Don't insult me with more lies. I know everything, Melissa. Everything, the affairs, the men you brought here when I was traveling, the threats you made to Sarah to keep her quiet, the cruel way you treat my daughter when you think no one is watching. I know everything." Melissa glanced quickly at Diego, who was already backing towards the door. "Don't you dare leave," Ryan said, looking at the man. "You came into my house, got involved with my wife, and now you're going to stay here and face the consequences." Diego stopped, desperation clear on his face. "Look, man, I didn't know this was the situation. She told me you were separated, that the marriage was over. I never would have gotten involved if I knew the truth. I'm not that kind of guy." Ryan sized up the man and realized he was also a victim of Melissa's lies. His anger subsided, replaced by something close to pity. "She lied to you too. She's an expert at it. You're probably not the first man she's deceived. Now get out of my house." Diego grabbed his jacket and left quickly, the sound of his car starting and speeding away, echoing down the quiet street. Melissa stood in the middle of the living room, her eyes darting from Ryan to the door and back to Ryan. The expression on her face was changing, shifting from panic to something different. Anger. Anger at being caught, at losing control of the situation. "You can't prove anything," she said, her voice hardening. "You have no proof of anything." Ryan took the phone out of his pocket and held it up. "Yes, I do. I have a video of you two just now. I have the conversations I heard between you and him on the phone. I have Sarah's testimony about all the other times. I have more than enough proof." Melissa took a step towards him, her expression becoming threatening. "Sarah, that bitch stuck her nose where it didn't belong. I warned her what would happen if she opened her mouth." "No," Ryan said firmly. "Sarah didn't tell me anything. She was too afraid of your threats. But I heard her talking to Brenda, thinking I was unconscious. I heard every word, Melissa, every detail, the affairs, the threats, everything." Melissa was silent for a moment, processing this, and then she changed tactics. Her expression softened, her eyes filled with fake tears. "Ryan, please, let me explain. I know it looks bad, but you have to understand. I felt so alone. You were always traveling, always busy with work. Beatrice always preferred Sarah to me. I felt excluded, rejected. I just wanted attention, affection. It was a moment of weakness, I know, but—" "Stop," Ryan said, his voice tired now. "Stop with the manipulations. I'm not falling for it anymore. You never loved Beatrice. You never cared about this family. You were only here for the money, the social status, the comfortable life I provided, and while you were cheating, threatening the people who work for me and treating my daughter with cruelty." Melissa realized the victim tactic wasn't working. The mask fell away completely, and what was left was pure rage. "You know what?" she said, venom in her voice. "You're right. I never loved you. I never loved this boringly perfect life you tried to build. You and your spoiled little girl, always with that clingy nanny who never knew her place. I only married you for the money, yes, and Diego isn't the only one. There were plenty of others, and you know—" "What else? I don't regret a thing." Ryan felt a tightness in his chest hearing that said with such coldness, but at the same time, he felt a strange relief. Finally, the truth was out, without disguises, without masks. "I'm glad you have the courage to admit it," he said. "It makes what comes next much easier. You're going to pack your bags and get out of this house tonight. Our marriage is over. I'm filing for an annulment tomorrow morning, and you won't see a cent of my money." Melissa laughed, a humorless laugh. "You think it's going to be that easy? I have rights. I'm your wife. Half of everything you own is mine." "No, it's not," Ryan replied with icy calm. "We signed a prenuptial agreement, remember? You didn't want to read it carefully at the time. You were too eager to get married and start enjoying the lifestyle I offered. But it's there in black and white. In case of proven adultery, you're not entitled to anything. And now I have more than enough proof of adultery." Melissa's expression changed to something close to desperation. "You can't do this to me. I have nowhere to go. No money." "You should have thought of that before you brought lovers into my house," Ryan said without emotion. "You should have thought of that before you threatened innocent employees. You should have thought of that before you treated my daughter with cruelty. Now face the consequences. You have 1 hour to pack your bags and leave. If you're not gone, I'm calling the police and showing them this video, along with all the other evidence I have." Melissa stared at him for a long moment, searching for any sign of weakness, any crack she could exploit, but she found none. The determination in Ryan's eyes was absolute. Finally, she turned her back and stomped up the stairs, her anger evident in every movement. Ryan stood there, alone in the living room, feeling his legs begin to give way. The adrenaline that had sustained him until then was wearing off, and his body was paying the price for the effort. He staggered to the sofa and collapsed onto it, his head throbbing with an unbearable pain. That's when he heard a sound from the stairs. It wasn't Melissa's heavy, angry footsteps. It was something lighter, hesitant, frightened. Ryan looked up and saw Beatrice coming down the steps slowly, still in her pink unicorn print pajamas, her bare feet making almost no sound on the carpet. She was clutching the teddy bear she slept with every night, holding it against her chest like a protective shield. Her green eyes were red and swollen from crying, and her little face was pale, scared. She had heard everything. She had heard the argument. She had heard the revelations. She had heard the truth about Melissa. "Daddy," the girl said in a trembling voice, so quiet Ryan could barely hear. "Is it true? Is Melissa leaving? We're not going to live with her anymore? She's not going to yell at me anymore?" Ryan felt his heart break into a million pieces seeing his daughter there, so small, so fragile, so vulnerable. Beatrice was only 7 years old. 7 years old, and she had already seen her biological mother leave, had lived with a cruel stepmother who treated her with coldness and sometimes cruelty, had held so much pain inside that small body. And now here she was, coming down the stairs in the middle of the night, seeking confirmation that the nightmare was finally over. Ryan opened his arms, ignoring the pain the movement caused his still recovering body. "Come here, sweetie, come to Daddy." Beatrice didn't need to be told twice. She ran down the rest of the stairs, crossed the living room at top speed, and threw herself into her father's arms, clinging to him with a surprising strength for someone so small. The teddy bear fell to the floor, forgotten. Beatrice buried her face in her father's neck and began to cry, a deep, liberating cry of someone who had been holding too much in for too long. Ryan hugged her with all the strength he had, feeling his own tears stream down his face, wetting his daughter's curly hair. "It's true, sweetie," he said softly. "Melissa is leaving. But don't worry. Everything's going to be okay. We're going to be okay." Beatrice cried on her father's shoulder, but it wasn't a cry of sadness. It was a cry of relief. "I never liked her, Daddy. She was always mean to me. She always yelled, always said I was annoying, that I was in the way. I only pretended to like her, because I thought you wanted me to." Ryan hugged his daughter tighter, feeling his own tears stream down his face. "I'm so sorry, Bea. I'm so sorry for bringing her into our lives. I'm so sorry I didn't see how she treated you. I should have paid more attention." "It wasn't your fault, Daddy," Beatrice said, wiping her tears. "She was good at pretending in front of you." Father and daughter held each other for a long time, until they heard the sound of suitcases being dragged down the stairs. Melissa appeared with 2 large suitcases, her face set in an expression of anger and resentment. She didn't even look at Ryan or Beatrice, simply dragged the suitcases to the door, opened it, and left, slamming the door hard behind her. The silence that followed was profound. Ryan hugged Beatrice, feeling the weight of years of lies and deceit finally being lifted from his shoulders. "It's all okay now, sweetie. Everything's going to be okay." Beatrice pulled back a little and looked at her father with those bright green eyes. "Daddy, can I ask you a question?" "Of course, sweetie. You can ask anything. Is Sarah still going to take care of me?" Ryan smiled for the first time in days. "Yes, she is. Sarah will always be here to take care of you." "Good," Beatrice said, smiling too. "Because I wanted her to be my real mom, not Melissa. Sarah." Ryan felt something stir in his chest hearing that. He hugged his daughter again, not sure what to say, but feeling that something important had been said. The next morning, when Sarah arrived for work as usual, she found a completely different scene. Melissa wasn't there. The atmosphere was lighter. The curtains were open, letting the sun in. Soft music was playing. And when she entered the kitchen, she found Ryan sitting at the table drinking coffee with Beatrice beside him. He was pale, with deep dark circles under his eyes, but he was up, awake, present, and smiling. "Mr. Taylor," Sarah exclaimed in surprise. You're okay. You're awake." Ryan looked at her, and Sarah saw something completely different in his gaze. It was deep gratitude, sincere respect, true recognition. "I am Sarah, and I need to talk to you. Please, can you sit down?" Sarah sat, her legs trembling, not understanding what was happening. Beatrice took her hand and smiled. "It's okay, Sarah. It's good news." "Sarah," Ryan began, his voice still hoarse but firm. "I heard everything. I heard your conversation with Brenda. I heard you talk about Melissa's affairs, about the threats she made, about everything you saw and kept to yourself. And I heard you say you love Beatrice as if she were your own daughter, and that you loved me too." Sarah turned white. The world seemed to stop around her. "Mr. Taylor, I didn't mean to. I'm so sorry. I never should have." "No," Ryan interrupted gently. "You have nothing to apologize for. You did nothing wrong. You were just being honest, vulnerable when you thought you were in a safe space, and I'm grateful I heard it because it finally opened my eyes to the truth." Sarah was trembling. "Melissa, is she still here?" "Not anymore," Ryan said. "She left last night. I caught her with another man right here in our home. I confronted her with everything I know, and I ended the marriage. She's not coming back." Sarah covered her face with her hands, tears starting to fall. "I should have told you sooner. I should have found a way to warn you. I feel so guilty." "You have nothing to be guilty about," Ryan said firmly. "You did what you could under the impossible circumstances she created. You protected my daughter. You protected this family the best way you could. And I am eternally grateful for that." Beatrice squeezed Sarah's hand. "Sarah, you're the best person in the world, and I love you so much." Sarah hugged the girl, crying even more. "I love you too, Bea. You're my girl." Ryan watched the two of them, the nanny and the daughter, who had such a deep and genuine bond, and felt his heart warm. "Sarah," he said, softly, "you said you loved me, and I need to be honest with you too." Sarah looked up, her heart racing. "I spent years not seeing what was right in front of me," Ryan continued. "I was so focused on trying to build a perfect family that I didn't realize the family I needed was already here. You were by Beatrice's side through all the hard times. You were the mother she needed when her biological mother left. You held this house together when I was lost, and I was too blind to see, too foolish to realize that you weren't just the nanny. You always have been the heart of this family." Sarah couldn't stop crying. "Mr. Taylor." "Ryan," he corrected gently. "Just Ryan. I'm not your boss right now. I'm just a man who discovered, almost too late, who really matters in his life." Sarah looked at him, her eyes full of tears and hope. What are you saying?" "I'm saying I'd like to get to know you better. Not as an employee, not as my daughter's nanny, but as Sarah, as the woman you are. The strong, dedicated woman, full of love to give. I'm saying that if you'll accept, I'd like the chance to return at least a little of all the love you've given this family." Sarah was speechless. She looked at Beatrice, who was grinning from ear to ear, her eyes shining with happiness. Then she looked back at Ryan, saw the sincerity in his eyes, saw the vulnerability, saw the man she had loved for so long finally seeing her for real. "I accept," she whispered. "I accept getting to know you better." Ryan smiled, and it was a genuine smile full of relief and joy. "Then we can start slow, one day at a time, no rush, no pressure, just let things happen naturally." The following months were a time of healing and rebuilding. Ryan recovered completely and returned to work, but with different priorities. He spent more time at home with Beatrice and Sarah. The dynamic between them changed naturally. Sarah continued to care for Beatrice, but now she was truly part of the family. She had dinner with them, participated in decisions, gave her opinion on everything. And slowly she and Ryan grew closer. Long talks after Beatrice was asleep, walks in, the park on Sundays, dinners for just the two of them. Ryan discovered facets of Sarah he had never noticed, and Sarah discovered sides of Ryan she had never seen either. There was no rush. Both knew they were building something solid, based on mutual respect, on a genuine love that had been growing silently. It was a gradual and respectful process. Long conversations, walks in the park, occasional dinners for just the two of them. Ryan discovering facets of Sarah he had never perceived, and Sarah discovering sides of Ryan she had never seen either. There was no rush. Both were building something solid on foundations of trust and admiration. Ryan brought Sarah's mother, Mrs. Miller, to live in the house. He adapted one of the downstairs rooms especially for her, hired professional caregivers, and ensured she had all the necessary medications and appointments with the best doctors. When Sarah saw the prepared room, she cried with gratitude and relief. Mrs. Miller, a 63-year-old woman with grey hair and a sweet smile, was delighted, but even more so with the loving way Ryan treated her daughter and Beatrice. Every night when Sarah visited her, Mrs. Miller would say, "That man is a good one, my daughter. Don't let him get away." Beatrice blossomed emotionally in a way Ryan had never seen. The girl was happier, more secure, more confident. She no longer had nightmares. She no longer had that constant fear of doing something wrong. She laughed more, played more, was simply more herself, and whenever someone asked about her family, she would say with pride, "I have the best dad in the world and the best mom in the world." And she would point to Sarah when she said it. It was on a September night 6 months, after Melissa had left, that Ryan finally asked Sarah to be his girlfriend. They were in the garden, sitting on the bench under the old oak tree. He had strung twinkle lights in the branches, which now glowed softly. Beatrice was asleep inside, and Mrs. Miller had also retired for the night. The night was beautiful, a clear sky, bright stars. Sarah looked beautiful in her simple blue dress, her hair down. "Sarah," Ryan said, taking her hand, "these last few months have been the happiest of my life, because I finally woke up to you." Sarah squeezed his hand back, her heart racing. "You taught me what true love is," he continued. "It's not about appearances or convenience. It's about being present. It's about caring. It's about choosing to stay day after day, even when it's hard. You did that for years without asking for anything in return. And now I want to give back. I want to be present for you the way you've always been for me and for Beatrice. So I'm asking you, will you be my girlfriend? Officially, for real, without hiding from anyone?" Sarah had tears in her eyes, but they were happy tears. "I will, Ryan. Yes, I will." They kissed there, under the stars, and it was as if all the pieces of their lives had finally fallen into the right place. It wasn't a perfect fairy tale ending. It was better than that. It was real. It was genuine. It was built on solid foundations of respect, friendship, and true love. A year later, Ryan and Sarah were married in a simple, intimate ceremony in their own backyard. Only close family and true friends were present. Beatrice was the flower girl wearing a pink dress she had chosen herself, and, when the justice of the peace asked if anyone objected to the marriage, the girl shouted loud and clear, "Nobody objects. This is the best thing that's ever happened." Everyone laughed, and the wedding proceeded with joy and lightness. When Ryan and Sarah exchanged vows, there was no doubt in either of their eyes. This was right. This was how it was meant to be from the beginning. Mrs. Miller cried with happiness, seeing her daughter finally find the love she deserved. Brenda, the nurse who had heard Sarah's first confession, was there too, smiling proudly. And Beatrice, between plates. Hove cupcakes ran around the garden, shouting to anyone who would listen, "Now Sarah is my real mum. Now I have a real family." And it was true. They were a family. Not perfect, not without challenges, but real, built on truths, not lies, on genuine love, not convenience. And when night fell and the guests had gone home, Ryan, Sarah, and Beatrice stood in the garden looking at the stars. Ryan hugged the two women in his life and said softly, more to himself than to them, but they heard him anyway, "True love isn't born from appearances or first impressions. It's born from constant presence, from silent care, from being there when everyone else is gone. And sometimes you have to nearly lose everything to finally see who was by your side all along." Sarah kissed him softly. "And I will always be by your side. You two are my family. You're my home." Beatrice hugged them both tightly. "And I'm the luckiest girl in the world, because I have the best parents anyone could ever have." And there, in that New York garden, under the stars of a warm spring night, that family found its peace. It found its place. It found, finally, the true love that had been there all along, patiently waiting to be seen. End of story. Dear listeners, we hope the story of Ryan, Sarah, and Beatrice has deeply touched your heart. If you were moved by this journey of discovery, resilience, and true love, please leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and tell us in the comments which moment stood out to you the most. Was it when Sarah confessed her feelings? When Ryan confronted Melissa? Or when this family finally found the happiness they deserved? Share your thoughts with us. Every day we bring you intense stories like this one, revealing the deepest side of the human soul and making us reflect on what truly matters in life. Stories about love, forgiveness, new beginnings, and the strength we find when we least expect it. We'll see you in the next episode with another narrative that will stir your emotions. Until then, and remember, sometimes the love we're looking for is closer than we imagine, just waiting to be seen with the eyes of the heart.